On the Gaza front, fighting is going on with different intensity and different characteristics in all sectors. Out of 5 Hamas brigades that functioned before October 7, 4 were disbanded and 1, the Rafah brigade, is still functioning. Of the 24 battalions, 20 were disbanded and 4 are still functioning, of which 2 are in Rafah and 2 are in the center and south of the Gaza Strip. As far as the IDF is concerned, a battalion or brigade that was disbanded as a functioning framework is considered dysfunctional and is out of the war. According to recent estimates, approximately 6,000 active fighters of Hamas and Islamic Jihad remained in the north of the Gaza Strip, most of them members of the hardline and fanatical core of both organizations, and they are the ones who are now trying in small groups and mainly by firing RPG rockets and sniper fire to wage a guerrilla war against the IDF fighters in their vicinity. According to estimates, Hamas still has about 1,000 rockets and missiles, as well as launchers, almost all of which are buried underground, and therefore they are very difficult to detect. But since most of the divisional frameworks entrusted to them were disbanded, the number of launches into Israeli territory decreased significantly. In the north of the Gaza Strip, the IDF moved from the phase of dismantling the fighting frameworks of the terrorist organization to the phase of purifying the area of squads and guerrilla groups, and at the same time, it destroys rocket production infrastructures and other means of warfare that are exposed. The stage of clearing out is conducted through raids by the brigade's combat teams into the neighborhoods in the areas where the guerrilla groups operate. Sometimes it is in raids on a divisional scale, such as, for example, in Camp Shati, which is now the center of Hamas resistance. The warfare against guerrilla leads the surrender of many terrorists who are being investigated, and the intelligence obtained from them allows the exposure of tunnels, rocket depots, and launchers that are hidden underground. For example, there is currently a pursuit of a cell of the Islamic Jihad, with the goal being to reach not only the terrorists, but also what they have in their possession. In some cases, there are still several dozen or even more than 100 terrorists who have gathered around a low-ranking but dominant local commander, and they are participating in the fighting against the IDF, mainly against the 401st Brigade in the Shati refugee camp and against the Nahal Brigade, which also operates in the center of the Gaza Strip and in the northern part of Gaza. Hamas tries to create the appearance of civil control in the Strip by means of its own police officers in blue uniforms who go out into the streets and arrest looters or officials who distribute the aid. However, working alongside them are local elements who, although connected to Hamas, are civilians. They also take over parts of the aid and through it control the population, so that little by little, in the absence of a decision by the Israeli cabinet on the day after, a kind of a new order is created on a neighborhood and urban basis in the north and center of the Gaza Strip. This allows Hamas to claim that the IDF failed to overthrow its civilian rule. A similar situation is also emerging in the Khan Yunis area, as the intense fighting to dismantle the Hamas battalions nears its end. On the other hand, in Rafah, Hamas controls both militarily and civilly, and the assessment is that until the IDF takes control of the city, the organization will not lose hope of continuing to rule the Gaza Strip, and the IDF will not enter Rafah until there is an understanding with the Egyptians about the day after. The IDF currently operates 6 brigades in the Gaza Strip, 4 in the Khan Yunis area, and 2, the Nahal and 401, in the north and center of Gaza. Each of the brigade is actually a combat team that combines infantry, armored battalions, and engineering units. In addition, all the special units of the IDF operate in the Gaza Strip, whose main tasks are investigating and mapping the tunnels, the underground complexes, and gathering intelligence for the benefit of above-ground warfare. The only place that the IDF has not yet operationally taken over is the Rafah area. The fighting, according to at least 3 senior security officials, creates heavy pressure on Yahya Sinwar, but lacks what they call the final political leg that would allow civilian control to be definitely taken away from Hamas, so that the entry into Rafah, which the IDF intends to control, can be coordinated with the Egyptians soon. As long as Rafah is in full control of Sinwar's hands, and as long as he and his associates in the senior leadership of Hamas can find refuge there, he will continue to show a hard line of negotiations when we're talking about the kidnapped Israelis. Sinwar and the Gazan leadership of the organization are the ones who are deciding, not the people of the political wing abroad. According to the same sources, the fighting in the Khan Yunis area, which takes place above and below the ground and leads to the destruction of the tunnels, greatly influences the decision of the leadership of Hamas. There are cases when the fighting that the IDF special units conduct on the ground progresses more quickly, both geographically and in intensity, compared to the fighting above the ground, which began to fade after the West Khan Yunis battalion was disbanded in the refugee camp where it was based. The fighting there continues, but the number of encounters is much smaller. Now, the purification phase will begin in Khan Yunis, as is currently being done in the north of the Gaza Strip. This is what Sinwar is afraid of, and especially of the achievements that the IDF brings in the stage of cleansing the area where the terrorists surrender. On Israel's northern front, there is an exchange of fire in which HEZBOLLAH is intensifying firing long and short-range anti-tank missiles with the aim of causing damage to civilian settlements and communities. According to the leaders of the organization, this was done in retaliation for the Air Force's attacks on targets in Shia villages in southern Lebanon. What HEZBOLLAH does not say is that its people retreated to the villages and workers from them because their outposts in open areas were destroyed by the IDF, including lookouts, fire areas, and assembly areas. HEZBOLLAH has more than 200 dead. His main achievement is the approximately 80,000 residents of the Galilee who cannot return to their homes. On the Lebanese side, about 130,000 residents fled from Shia villages to the areas north of the Litani, where the IDF is still almost inactive. The Israeli residents who were evacuated from the settlements near the Lebanese border are exerting heavy pressure on the government and the security cabinet to return to their homes, but condition this on the creation of a new security situation in which they will not live under the threat of physical intrusion into their settlements and direct fire from close range that will be used against them. The American envoy to Lebanon, Amos Hochstein, is now in Israel, and he is proposing a political settlement that will include 3 components. The first, the withdrawal of HEZBOLLAH militants and its means of heavy fire, including rockets and missiles, to north of the Litani. The second, border corrections at 13 points that HEZBOLLAH demands. The third, a political arrangement that will allow for the election of a president in Lebanon who will be in the opinion of HEZBOLLAH and close to it. At the moment, Lebanon does not have a permanent president and a government. They are both temporarily. Without a permanent president and government, it is impossible to reach an agreement. since it is not possible to sign a formal agreement with an organization, HEZBOLLAH, that is not a sovereign state and also is recognized as a terrorist organization. The assessment in Israel now is that the results of the fighting in Gaza will affect Hassan Nasrallah and his Iranian patrons if they accept the political settlement ordered by the American, Saudi, Egyptian, Qatari, and French mediators. However, how will Israel act if there is no hostage deal with Hamas and Hezbollah ceases fire? The Americans will pressure Israel to cease fire in order to give diplomatic maneuvering space to achieve a new arrangement in southern Lebanon. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant is pressing to continue the attacks so that if it is decided to maneuver on the ground into Lebanon, the IDF will no longer encounter significant resistance. The chances of reaching a settlement in southern Lebanon that would include the removal of the Hezbollah army to a distance of more than 10 kilometers from the border are now at 50%. Both sides are currently trying to prevent a situation in which Israel will be forced to maneuver into southern Lebanon in order to keep Hezbollah away on its own, but the Northern Command is making all the preparations for this. If a political settlement is not reached, it may happen in a few weeks or a few months. We will continue to follow and analyze what God is doing in the Holy Land. Please continue to pray for the peace of Israel and the peace of Jerusalem. And thank you for helping us share the truth of what is happening in Israel so that people will know how to pray for this region.